it's like everybody that had told me, dude, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, what a stupid idea this is. The people that had laughed at me when I told them, oh, I'm going to be a fighter pilot, man, they crawled in that cockpit with me. And we have our helmet that sits on the rail right next to us. And on that day, in this just like mind spinning all over the place, all these people, this called a parasitic drag that's like stuck to me. I just reached over and I grabbed my helmet and I put this dark visor down, just like Darth Vader visor, and I closed them all out. It was like the most empowering moment of my life when you realize that, man, nobody's coming to help. This is a moment that is up to you.
This is the Business of Advice podcast, where we help good advisors become great business owners.
This is a special edition of the Business of Advice podcast, as we are releasing it on the 4th of July. And I cannot think of a better guest on the 4th than Lieutenant Colonel Dan Rooney. Lieutenant Colonel Rooney is a decorated fighter pilot. He served 3 combat tours to Iraq. He's the 2-time recipient of the Top Gun Award. He's received the Air Force Commendation Medal, the Air Medal, the Anti-Terrorism Medal, the Combat Readiness Medal, and the Air Expeditionary Medal. And as if that isn't enough, a lot of you probably know him because of his organization that he started, the Folds of Honor, which we have partnered with here at Advisors Excel through the years. They have now provided over 52,000 academic scholarships, totaling over $244 million. Lieutenant Colonel Rooney is also married with 5 daughters. So not that he's not busy enough in his spare time, he is also a PGA golf professional. So Lieutenant Colonel Rooney, thank you for your service, I think, first and foremost, but welcome to this special 4th of July episode of the Business of Advice podcast.
Yeah, I've got my 4th of July Militia America shirt on. And
I love it.
You know, I call moments of synchronicity or chance with a purpose, but how we came together is through, you know, my dear brother, Gary Woodland.
Yeah.
Who's the, you know, pride and joy at Topeka, U.S. Open winner. And we both played golf at the University of Kansas. He was a decade after me. But we launched this brand called Militia America with Puma.
Yep.
And literally, Gary had worn it for 3 weeks, and he wins the U.S. Open. But we own the red, white, and blue space. So in honor of 4th of July, got my Militia America on. And I apologize in advance. I'm up in Grand Haven, Michigan, which is where Folds of Honor started. Not many people know that at all. My parents' little golf course here that's been transformed now into American Dunes. Jack Nicklaus donated his $3 million fee, and we had a lot of people come together to build this just amazing golf church. But it's a lakeside little town, and there's a lot of activity behind me, including people mowing their yards and all that. So apologize to everybody in advance. We're up here in the land of 4th of July chaos, so it might get a little loud.
That's good. Well, as we get started, do you have a favorite 4th of July memory?
Oh, man, I just think that, like, as a kid, number one, there's nothing more fun than lighting that wick.
Yeah.
And that space between when you light the wick and run, between fear and faith. And as I grew older, hands down, my favorite 4th of July memory was I always made it a point to lead the flyovers across Oklahoma. And on the 4th of July, we would typically take off about 7 o'clock at night, and we would hit like 40 locations across the state of Oklahoma with a ship of F-16s. And so it's all timed out, you know, going across the state. But my favorite memory, we would always finish at Grand Lake, which is a lake that's north of Tulsa, about an hour and a half. And we would go up, it's called Duck Creek, and all the boats would be out at Duck Creek, and we would do a very low pass, and the last one we would all go straight vertical.
Oh, wow.
So the F-16 can stand on its tail and go straight vertical, so there's more thrust than weight. And as we peel back out, inverted out of Duck Creek, you go back to Tulsa, we would right size, and it was about an 8-minute flight back to Tulsa, and looking out of that bubble canopy, watching all the fireworks that were starting to go off, because we did that last one right at dusk.
Yeah.
And there are a few moments I felt, so proud to be an American, and you just have this, this view that very few people are blessed to ever have in their lives, that unrestricted view from a cockpit of an F-16, and you just watch all that stuff that you fight for out there. and it makes you just so proud. I mean, I get a little emotional. So proud of this country, and so proud to be able to defend the values, and more importantly, the people that make up the United States of America.
That's cool. Well, your memories are better than mine. You got me. You one up me there. But maybe a different type of question, because I think a lot of people will be listening to this over the 4th of July weekend. As people are gathering, is there a message that you would like to deliver to everyone who listens to this? Just whether it's about, country and kind of where we're at, or just what you think people should be doing or thinking about this 4th of July weekend?
Yeah, for me, it's red, white, and blue. And in a country where it seems like at every turn we're forced to pick red or blue,
Mm-hmm.
and just put that away on the 4th of July, and just be grateful that we live in this country that is red, white, and blue, and focus on the stuff that brings you together with your family and friends, not the little stuff that divides. And it's just so crazy, the world we live in, and how many people want to remind us of the handful of things that divide us. And as humans, man, we basically have the same 4 or 5 emotions, every one of us.
Yeah.
And, faith that today and tomorrow we're going to be okay. We want our families to be safe. We want to be free. We want our health. We want a little jingle in our pocket to grab a cold Budweiser on Friday. Man, we're pretty much all the same in our desires and wants. And that would be my message on the 4th of July is, man, focus on that, and focus on the fact that it is America's birthday, and we're all part of the Lucky Sperm Club. I know that's a little politically incorrect, but you don't control where you're born in this world, where you get to come, and the fact that we got dropped into this country called America, either by birth or you landed here from someplace else. You have won the lottery of living in the greatest country in the world.
Well said. So I hit on your background a little in the opening, but probably talked a little bit more of your accomplishments. Would you just maybe share some of your background? What led you to this career serving our country in the Air Force?
Yeah, so I love stories, right? So hang with me. I'll share the story of how I became a fighter pilot, the inspiration. I mentioned that term synchronicity, chance with a purpose. Like fundamentally for me, I am certain that serendipity, blind luck, coincidence, none of that stuff exists. Every moment of our days is providential. The people and experiences placed in your path, and when you wake up and start paying attention, the guidance that you'll receive on a daily basis is, it's divine. And to unpack that a little bit more, so the moment of synchronicity for me, I was 12 years old. I'm at the Stillwater Country Club playing golf, is, where I got dropped off every day. And I meet my first fighter pilot, and his name is Steve Courtright, call sign Reno. And it just came out of my mouth. I'm like, man, I had no idea he could be grown up and cool. And he was my first man crush. And I'm like, holy cow. And he was, took time to interact with me, which is so often as adults, people just blow past kids. I always try to take extra time with kids. And it was a couple days later, I was playing golf with my dad, and I'm like, hey, Dad, I know what I want to do with my life. So I want to be a golf pro and a fighter pilot. Whatever it's worth, not much in my bank account, but I'm a rear bird, only guy in the history of the world to be a club professional and a fighter pilot. But I'll never forget, he asked me a question that day. Said, my dad looked at me and said, can you tell me which way an airplane takes off? And I was 12, and I'm like, yeah, man, I think it's into the wind. He said, that's exactly right. And for all of us, when we can flip the script on resistance and challenge, which is inevitable, and so many people look at it as, man, this is a negative thing. Why is my life so hard? Why is everything so difficult? But you realize that when you lean into that, that's what God puts in your life to help you ascend. And that was the beginning of a journey that would take me from growing up in Stillwater. I mentioned, played golf at the University of Kansas, was a good player there. I played NCAAs and US amateurs, but I had a different dream, and it was to go be a fighter pilot. So, man, I left Kansas, and I made the mistake my senior year. I told all the guys on the golf team I was going to be a fighter pilot. Everybody laughed at me. And that's another lesson. Just go do it in life. Don't waste time telling people, because nobody's going to ever understand what's on your heart, right? Your family won't, your friends won't, your spouse won't. That's unique. That's how God communicates to you what he puts on your heart. And, off I went to enlist in the United States Air Force. My mom cried. My parents are like, what are you doing? No, like grand, you know, service history in my family. My, granddad had been in World War II, but long since passed. And so that was how I got to that place.
One of the things as I've gotten to know you through the years that has always impressed me, and we're coming off just a few weeks ago, we did an AE Open where a lot of our advisors came down to the Patriot Golf Course in Tulsa. You guys put on a top show, and I didn't go, but the guys were coming back and they're bragging about your new facility that Folds is building and just the golf, everything about it. But I say that to what I've seen in you, and it goes to being a fighter pilot. And you kind of talked about the kid aspect, right? So I'll try and tie it back into there. But whether it's fighter pilot, your ability on the golf course, you're a best-selling author, but have also created what I think is one of the most amazing charities out there. All of those things, as I've watched you do them with an excellence that not a lot of people do. I think one of the things we've loved with Folds is just the level of excellence that everything is done at. Can you just talk about I don't even know how to say this. Like, what drives you in that, or like, what advice would you have for people about just doing things with excellence, right? So maybe tying it back into that little kid, who's got these dreams to go do something big. Like, everything I watch you do is done with just this excellence that I appreciate.
I think, I was blessed with good parents. Number one, it was like, hey, this is what a good job looks like.
Yeah.
Finish it. And, I was striping my yard as a 12-year-old, or I was making sure every range ball was off the stupid driving range at the Stillwater Country Club, or sweeping the cart bar. And I think, some of that is definitely innate. Some of it is shaped. I've got, one daughter whose room is really clean and the other whose is a mess. So I think, some of that was there. For me, I'll take people to pilot training. I think, fundamentally, there was such a shift in my life of like self-belief. And so, I showed up at Wichita Falls, Texas, Shepherd Air Force Base for the first day of pilot training. And there were 45 of us in that class. And the colonel came in and he said, hey, welcome to your boyhood dream. He was like, over the next 2.5 years, we're going to spend $8 million per pilot training you. Wow. He said, but the realities are, we also have the highest attrition rate of any training in the military. Not only are we the most expensive, that about 4.8% of you will actually be fighter pilots, right? We got other stuff in the Air Force that you can fly. And obviously, I made it through that 2.5 years, and I'll share just a couple of the transformational lessons that I learned. Number one was like day 2, knowing I had no chance, facing a challenge I was way bigger than me, unprepared for. And I went to Kansas, right? Everybody else went to the Air Force Academy, Annapolis. I started a new routine that I've not stopped in 23 years. And that was every morning, I set my alarm. Usually don't have to have an alarm anymore because I'm old. But I get up, I make a cup of coffee, and I open the Bible. And then I go to the gym in that order. And it's like that Trinity just propels you to start your day the right way and leads to excellence. I'm always like, one good decision leads to another. That's the greatest gift of the Air Force ever gave me. Day 2 of my training was worse than day 1. And we got like an 8-hour brief on the thousands of people who have killed themselves in training, free of combat. And I remember at the end of it, this young captain said, hey, this is a dangerous business. The best advice I can give you is stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And that one really clicked with me. And for all of us, you never know when a challenge, an opportunity is going to enter your life. And you got to be at your best to take advantage of those moments. So that was the second one. Then about 18 months into the program, I make it to F-16 training, and you get 4 rides with an instructor. This is at Luke Air Force Base in Glendale, Arizona, so outside of Phoenix. And your 5th ride is solo. And I remember, or you're out of the program, right? $65 million fighter jet, 0 to 50,000 feet in under 1 minute. nine G's. It'll go Topeka to Kansas City in 25 seconds at top speed, right? I mean, this is an insane machine. Four rides. Fifth ride, I'm sitting in this cockpit all by myself, and you realize that for me, I wasn't alone in that moment. It's like everybody that had told me, dude, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, what a stupid idea this is. The people that had laughed at me when I told them, oh, I'm going to be a fighter pilot, man, they've crawled in that cockpit with me. And we have our helmet that sits on the rail right next to us. And on that day, in this just like mind spinning all over the place, all these people, this called a parasitic drag that's like stuck to me. I just reached over and I grabbed my helmet and I put this dark visor down, like Darth Vader visor, and I closed them all out. It was like the most empowering moment of my life when you realize that, man, nobody's coming to help. This is a moment that is up to you. And you learn the single seat fighter pilot mentality. Like, don't be a prisoner of common assumption. You know, there are so many people, some well-intended, some not well-intended, that preach from this Bible of conventional wisdom that if you're not careful, man, you'll become a prisoner of the guardrails of life.
Yeah.
And there's a Wordsworth poem and there's a stanza in it that says, you come into this world trailing clouds of glory. And I'll translate that to everybody listening as God brought you into this world for a reason. It is your job to figure out why and then glorify him by getting as good as you possibly can at doing it. And so I reached forward that day. I hit start 2. There's no keys required to start an F-16. and I went and flew. And I landed. I remember pulling into my parking spot at Luke Air Force Base. It's August. I roll up this bubble canopy and this cold wind hits me. It's like 140 degrees outside. And you realize, dude, I've been in fight or flight literally this entire time. But as I shut the motor down, this gift lands on my soul that changed me every day for the rest of my life. And it was go before you're ready. And it was like God on my shoulder, like, hey, man, if you go, I will be with you. And I think that is the DNA that ties greatness together. I mean, look at you guys starting Advisor Excel. It's 20 years, right? You're coming up on it.
Coming up on it. Yeah.
On your 20-year anniversary, if you go back to that moment, like, you just start, right? Go before you're ready. You don't have to have it all figured out. But the beauty of it is out on the ragged edges, whether you're flying a fighter jet or I'm starting a nonprofit above my garage or building golf courses, dude, it's not very crowded because there ain't many people out there that are willing to get out to that space between fear and faith. And I'm telling you, man, that is the elixir. That is where the good stuff lives. That is where you feel alive. And, you know, going through that training and the lessons I learned as a fighter pilot just like prepared me for the next, you know, the 2.0 of life and where I am now. And but these are lessons that are available to all of us. And I get the blessing to pay it forward by sharing these stories.
That's great. So, I mean, so many good lessons there. I'm going to ask you a few. You know, that what you said there and I was going to ask you about go before you're ready later, but we hit on that. Yeah. We'll talk about some other things in the book that I've taken away. I remember John Maxwell said at one of our events one time, he said, I found in life that when I start walking, God starts working, right? And same principle, he said, so many people will just wait until the perfect condition. But he's like, what I found is like when you take action, like the pieces that you need to come together tend to, you know, come into your life. So very much the principle of go before you're ready. Let me ask you, you made the comment about stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And one of the questions I want to ask, because I think this applies to so many things in business entrepreneurship. You know, I think people probably seen Top Gun, so they have a Hollywood understanding of what, you know, it's like to be up there in a plane like that. But can you just talk about how important your training was when you actually encountered real combat? Because you've actually been in real combat, right?
Yeah.
So
Three
like,
combat tours in Iraq.
yeah.
I've done a lot of real combat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you just speak to like how important? So I think in business, right, it's those reps and the training that are so important. Kind of what you said, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Just how did that help you when you were in real combat?
Yeah. It is, we call it learned effective. And we sit there and obviously, we fight the way we train the way you fight. So it feels no different. It's like you talk about a head football coach says, man, we had a great week in practice.
Yep.
We're ready to go for the game. There's no difference, man. I am pursuing excellence every day and the accountability that comes with it. And, the thing also as a fighter pilot, you know how to do what you're going to do, and literally you can flip a switch and there's so much stimuli coming at you when you're going to drop a bomb at night in combat in close proximity to friendlies. And if you were like, oh my gosh, what about this, what about this, what about that, what about this, dude, you'd be paralyzed. And we get to a mode where, hey, we're going to drop a bomb. It's like, man, I can flip the switch right now and I'm going to go through the 60 things that have to happen and I'm not even going to think about them. And like, sharpening the spear at that level is a lesson that you learn in our business that you'd never learn in normal life.
Yeah.
The other piece is, I talked about the dark visor down, being able to close out all of those distractions is an incredibly important discipline part of what we do. But I would say probably like the most important thing, all of that aside, like I'm going to be ready. Nothing ever goes the way you think it's going to go. Ever in combat, man. We would sit and brief it up, and the ability to be adaptable to circumstance is like the emotional IQ that requires like walking out the door and understanding sudden change is coming and how I react to that moment of when what hits the fan, because it's gonna happen. Those are the defining moments as fighter pilots. And those are the skills where I'm controlling my breathing. I take my voice down when I got four other guys I'm leading out there at night. Like the more intense and the more emotional it gets, and you could translate this to, your office.
Yep.
If there's a big disagreement, if there's whatever, my voice slows down and it gets softer. And I'm setting the tone for the chaos that is going around. And I think that's probably, I know that's the number one skill that you take away that translates. And we all have conflict in our lives too. And it's a great lesson, man. I never meet conflict with conflict.
Yep.
It's the Martin Luther King approach. And I've done it a lot of my life. You're going to go out there and you're going to kind of try to do big things. You're going to have people that come after you. You're going to have haters. And Martin Luther King was famous for like when someone hit him, physically punched him, he didn't react. That's the fastest way to diffuse any hostility. And it's unique in our world. The last thing I'll share on this is like the difference between the personality profiles, and the Air Force spends a lot of money figuring this out, like all the psychological tests of a fighter pilot versus, say, a Navy SEAL. Like we're completely different animals. I've never been in a bar fight. Don't get fired up, because I'm flying an airplane that could take out a city block if I get pissed off at somebody, or you get riled up. And we always did our jobs with the mindset of saving lives, but never offensive. But man, how do we save lives of our guys on the ground, the innocent civilians? And so it's fun to go back and tell that story. Thanks for asking. I'm right back in the cockpit at night over Iraq, going through a lot of that stuff in my mind.
I can imagine. You talked about this a little bit. One of the other questions I want to ask you is just maybe applying that as a leader, like what does leadership look like in, I'll say combat, but just when, like you said, when things aren't going right, like you kind of talked about how you're talking, but any other things that you saw from a leadership style that were really, really important when things are just maybe a little crazy around you or around the team?
Yeah, I mean, I think I hit on it. It's just like, man, the crazier it gets, the more they will, and all they have is my voice. Like on a crazy night when we're launching, something's happening in the air, I'm gonna be the coolest dude. Just the cadence in my voice has such control. And you watch the great head football coaches and in basketball coaches, the days of Mike Ditka's are gone, man. These guys are sitting there. Watch Andy Reid work when it is fourth quarter with the guys, man. He's not yelling and screaming. They're bringing everything down. They're getting your people in the right place to succeed. A daily leadership, I think, is probably more important than crisis leadership and people can take away. But our motto at Folds of Honor and in leading that team, and this comes from Colonel Nick, our president. So I'm stealing this, giving him credit. It's work hard, be nice. And so I always say, you set the example, you're going to work hard, but you're going to be nice. And people come up with these grand philosophies, and core values, walking in the building, man, we're expecting you to work hard and be nice today. And some days you're going to feel like crap. You're not going to work hard, but you're going to be nice or don't come. And that's my leadership philosophy.
That pretty incredible philosophy. Like you think about how simple, but how powerful that is. You're leading by example, right? But you're being the person that people want to be around. I mentioned your book earlier, Flying to the Winds, that people should pick up. But we talked about the go before you're ready. The other, I'll say, maybe principle or concept you talk about is, I always say CAVU. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but okay. So
right.
Maybe just start with that. Would you share a little bit about that, like principle also?
Yep. So I call it a code of living. The Stoics would call it a life attitude. At its origins, it's a fighter pilot acronym, CAVU, CAVU for those listening. But it translates to ceiling and visibility unlimited. And obviously the perfect day to go fly a fighter jet. But for me, I adopted this into my code of living of life. And that man, every day is an unlimited gift. And truly reminding myself and holding myself accountable to appreciate the sanctity of the day the Lord has given us, because it's the only one we got. It's the only one we're guaranteed. And it's so easy for most of us to wake up on Monday and say, man, I can't wait till Friday. A lot of people ain't going to get to Friday. So you better enjoy Monday. And the principles of CAVU, basically, I outline in the book Flying to the Wind, and you can get that anywhere you want. It goes back to support Folds of Honor, but they're 12 lines of effort, LOEs, and these are my 12 non-negotiables that I architect into every day. Most of them through routine, some are philosophical through action, but I'm a huge believer in routine, and most successful people, and I'm sure you have one, they have a routine. And it generally starts early in the morning. And as we know, and it's, very in vogue, I talk about 1% better every day. It's the compounding interest. You guys are in that business at Advisors Excel over time, because there aren't really big gains. But every day, regardless of circumstance, I pretty much live it the same way. And the cool part of the origins of CAVU is I got back from my third combat tour of duty in Iraq. I almost killed myself flying an F-16. I found myself in the darkest season of my life. There was a lot of stuff going on. Doesn't matter for our discussion here today. But I'd gotten to the point where I really didn't care if my takeoffs matched my landings anymore. And I had this amazing kind of God intervention in East St. Louis, on a run in that industrial wasteland where literally I stopped. I couldn't take another step. And I looked up and I'm like, God, you got to give me a sign today because I'm empty. And out of this like cloud deck came an eagle, and it made three circles around me. And this wasn't like an eagle you see on a postcard. This thing looked like me, right? I mean, it was dirty, living in East St. Louis. It was beat up and had been in the fight. But I feel it's just divine wash over me, and I take one more step. And so often when we're in these dark places in life, man, it's not about one more week. It's about one more step. It's about one more day. And that night I find myself in the airport, and a Gold Star wife, her name's Ginger Gilbert, calls me, and her husband Troy had been an F-16 pilot in Iraq and had been killed over there. And when he died, he left behind five kids. Oldest was 8 years old, Boston, down to 6-month-old twin daughters, Aspen and Annalise, and they're all Folds of Honor recipients. And Ginger is a believer, and I tell her this story, and she said, "Dan, man," so that's amazing. She said, "But you're not going to believe this." So today would have been Troy's 40th birthday, and his favorite scripture was Isaiah 40:31. Even young men will grow weary and stumble along the way, but those who hope in the Lord, I will raise them up on wings like eagles. And on that day, it's like I walked out of the desert. And looking back, I'd been in this season of struggle, but it was very clear that, God needed to work on me. And he does that when you're alone, right? That getting rid of your ego and all these things that get in the way of us being vessels. Painful moments, not fun, but so foundational in our lives because, you're going to write your legacy in the storm. Life is about what you do when it doesn't go your way. That's definitely another common thread of greatness. It's how people react in the storm. And that night, literally in the airport, I began to write "Fly into the Wind," and it was just like, dude, it wasn't mine. It just poured out of me. And this was God working through a fighter pilot to write a book, which is the hardest freaking thing I've ever done in my life. And it's changed so many people's lives. I feel very blessed to be a vessel to impact others. Know whether that's saved marriage, or people have found sobriety, or people have, had the courage to go before you're ready and go chase the dream and walk out of jobs that they've hated for 15 years and gone and started whatever. But these testimonials that come back to me are just so fulfilling. And the cool part is, if you pick up a copy and people read the book, to share openly my brokenness and the stuff I went through, but most importantly, the stuff I discovered that changed me forever, that never would have had I not had these trying experiences.
That's an incredible story. It gave me chills kind of hearing you share it. So it's talking on the idea of impact, and not to switch gears, but maybe slightly.
Yeah.
Obviously, we here at Advisors Excel have partnered with you and Folds of Honor a few times now. In fact, Folds of Honor is the organization we've raised the most money for over our 20 years. And we're going to be partnering again. I don't know if we've announced that. So if people listen to this on the 4th, it'll be a secret announcement of that at our World Series in January when we celebrate kind of that 20-year anniversary. But maybe just for those who aren't, because I think on the 4th of July, I can't think of a better story to be told than the Folds of Honor story. Would you just share kind of the origin of that and then the mission of Folds of Honor? And then there's a few other things I want to ask you about it also.
Yeah. So number one, thank you. Yes, you guys have donated over $2 million in life-changing donations to Fold. So thank you so much. And that's what brings us together here through our brother Gary Woodland. But yeah, again, it goes back to chance and purpose. And I was sitting on the back deck here in Grand Haven, Michigan, talking to my 84-year-old dad about it last night. Like, imagine if I was never on this flight.
It's crazy.
What do our lives look like? And that flight was from Chicago here to Grand Rapids, Michigan in June. It was June 6, 2006. And I land in Grand Rapids, and as we're pulling into the gate, the captain comes over the PA and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have an American hero on board. We're carrying the remains of Corporal Brock Buckland, who was killed in Iraq, and his identical twin brother, Corporal Brad Buckland, is in first class and is bringing him home. Captain makes a request that everybody stay in their seats that night until Brock's remains and removed from the right cargo hold. And I've certainly witnessed a lot of sacrifice in combat, but I'd never seen this side of war. And I watched that family on the darkest night of their lives, on that tarmac, his brothers, his parents, his wife, and his 4-year-old son, is that American flag draped coffin inched down from the cargo ramp. And ceremony finishes up, and I stand up that night, and despite the captain's request, more than half the people had boarded the plane. Man, nowhere to go except that blanket of freedom we will all sleep under tonight. On the 4th of July, courtesy of Corporal Brock Buckland and the 1.1 million veterans who have joined the eternal ranks. And I walked off the airplane, lots of emotions going through me, and I felt a hand on my shoulder. And looking back, I mean, it's so clear it was the hand of God. And he calls the least among us. And that's why if you look at the Bible, the disciples were a bunch of broken people, man, and I fit into that category. But also, we're willing to listen. And my wife and I, a few months later, we hosted a little golf tournament here in Grand Haven, Michigan, to benefit that family at my family's golf course. And that was the day that really changed me, as it woke me up to like this irony that when you're helping someone else, you're the one being helped. And it's like this portal that I walked through. Was like, oh my gosh, this is what it's about. Man, the purpose of life is about living a life of purpose. And going back on our discussion today, and it was like, oh man, it starts to make sense over time. It's like, oh man, God put all this stuff together, the golf, the fighter pilot thing, so that we could build a different kind of church and a pulpit that I could preach from, doors wide open. And this one folds, it's so clear to me 16 years into the journey, it's a church, but we're a church of action. And if you get out of the Bible, man, it's just, that's what the big push is in the Bible. It's like, man, don't talk about it. Go do it. And that is what Folds of Honor does. It's 87 times in the Bible it says, take care of my widows and orphans. And that is what we do in this amazing tribe. Advisors Excel included people all over this country that are, supporting us. And it all started above our garage, right? I mean, with nothing. You talk about go before you're ready.
Yeah.
You talk about dark visor down. Same things you guys went through. I'm sure when you were starting out, people were like, oh, this is so stupid. It'll never work. They had all the reasons why it will never work. Because people don't like to see you go the places that your heart is calling you to go, but they're not willing to go often in life.
Well, it's you say that go before you're ready. You think what started with, you hosting a small golf tournament to raise some money. Now, 50,000 plus scholarships, kids that have gotten scholarships or spouses too, right? And
Yep.
Almost $250 million in scholarships that you've awarded. It's pretty phenomenal. One of the other things that I think is really cool, you kind of leaked this to our group because they all came back telling me, they're like, oh, you got to watch the Memorial Golf Tournament this weekend. So this was a few weeks ago. Well, I guess it'll be a few months ago now that when this actually releases. But Folds of Honor, you partnered with the PGA Tour for the official launch of Folds of Honor Friday. One of the things I didn't realize is golf was the only sport that was not playing the national anthem, but you now are doing that. I know Jack Nicklaus was a big part of that, and you got to launch it there. I know he's a big hero of yours, but maybe just talk about that tradition. I know it's going to be a new tradition in golf, and pretty neat to see or hear it and then get to watch it that week too.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, as a golf fan, I got golf on, 4 days a week. Thank God for unanswered prayers. I'm not a good putter. I probably may have made some money out there on the tour, but God had a way bigger plan. And you're exactly right. So this hits me a couple of years ago that like the sport I love is the only sport that does not observe the national anthem. And like, everything, it takes a long time, man, to get places. And don't think my first meeting went well because, oh, yeah, well, here's why we don't, this, that. But what do you do when life doesn't go your way? I just kept showing up and was able to eventually get a meeting with Jay Monahan, who was the commissioner of the PGA Tour. And, Jay's a Catholic and awesome dude. And I connected. I'm like, hey, man, it's not about anything other than honoring those who serve. And if you look at our national anthem, and it got all messed up in football a couple years ago, they figured that out, I think. But the national anthem was written by Francis Scott Key in Baltimore Harbor as he was watching the fight and the bombs bursting in air between us and the Brits, but our flag was still there. It's about honoring service. That's it. And when I was able to put it in that context, he was like, Dan, we'll figure this out. And the cool part of the evolution is, unlike other sports, we were like, well, let's do something better. Let's create a moment that lasts longer than the minute and 57 seconds at the Super Bowl where everybody's together and then everybody sits down and you go your separate ways. Let's do it on Friday, which is our favorite day. So a leverage Friday. And let's play the national anthem like we do in the military, which is at the end of the day. So they're playing it at the end of the day now after the final putt on Fridays. But they're asking players and fans to wear red, white, and blue on that day. And as I talked about when you asked me about 4th of July earlier, man, you don't have to pick red or blue. Just put on some red, white, and blue, and nobody's setting that table. And we're very hopeful that this will turn into a great new tradition and a game full of a lot of old traditions and a place where America can come together. And, as a golf fan, to, have an official partnership with the PGA Tour is insanely cool.
Yeah.
With the tour logo and the Folds logo. And you just think about, 16 years ago above my garage, sitting in my parents' little house here in Grand Haven. After that little golf tournament, the places God has taken this is just extraordinary.
So I want to ask you about that. This is what's related to the charity, but like you have now scaled this big organization. So taking it from where you did to there, what have been some of the biggest maybe challenges, but then what have been some of the most important steps you've taken in scaling Folds to where it's at today?
Well, I mean, I take very little credit. It's when you're around this, it's a God thing because I watch the Holy Spirit put it on people's hearts. It's must be present to win. So get in the fight every day, which we do.
Yep.
Don't be a prisoner of common assumption, right? Go places others aren't willing to go. And for me, as we built Folds, I've targeted great like-minded brands. And you look at like our partners from, Quick Trip was my first partner. They're based in Tulsa, but QT's awesome. Coca-Cola, Yeti. I mean, I was texting with the COO of Chipotle last night. They're doing their online summer roundup for us right now. Professional golf. We're the official first responders charity of the NFL. That's week 8 this year. Anheuser-Busch, which was one of my very first cold calls, man. Everybody out there in your business, you're selling clients, right? I literally cold called Anheuser-Busch, flew from Tulsa to St. Louis, and I went back every 6 months for 3 years until I got a meeting with the CEO, and that would launch the longest standing partnership that we have outside of Quick Trip. But AB is the largest. They've donated over $26 million to us as an organization. But I think, like most of them, man, you just got to do the right thing and you got to be resilient. That's the common thread of folks that are successful is you just keep getting in the fight every single day, and don't let it not working out get you down, because that's just the realities. Most of the time it doesn't work out.
I've got another interesting question for you, and I've not even said this to you, and it wasn't anything I sent you in advance, but one of the things I will say that I noticed about you. So let's go back to Anheuser-Busch. I know they've been a partner for a long time, and you could argue they made some missteps, a few years ago, or definitely were
Last year.
Yeah, I guess it was just last year, huh? Well, kind of some controversial stuff that everyone was jumping on them, right? But I actually saw you like proactively speak out in support of them, right? And just what a great partner they've been. So when it was easy for, I think, everyone to abandon ship, jump away, take all the shots they wanted out on them, you actually did the opposite. And I've never told you that, but I watched that and I kind of witnessed it. And I'm like, pretty cool to see someone who's going to stick by people and be like a good partner. So just any thoughts you have there, because, even you probably saying something could have been interpreted in a negative way to some degree, but
Yeah, and that's great. And again, man, these are life lessons. Like when a friend needs help, you help them.
yeah,
Pretty simple. Like you don't have to philosophize around it. And Brendan, their CEO, is a former Marine, CIA operative. Yeah, man, did they make some missteps? Holy smokes. It was one can that lit off an unprecedented dumpster fire. Like there's no PR firm that has the play. Everybody figured, well, this stuff will burn out in a couple weeks. It's one can. Everybody knows, hey, this wasn't sanctioned. It was one can. This isn't a formal campaign. And man, did it not burn out. It lit into an inferno. And I called Brendan up and I'm like, man, how can I help? And we worked on a strategy with them to tell the story of their 13-year partnership with Folds of Honor. And to their credit, they were always people that never wanted to tell the story. They just wanted to do good. And I said, hey, man, this is the opportunity that we have to set the record straight and not touch the can. We don't have to deal with that. Let's just go do the next right thing. And we talked about that all the time. What's the next right thing? And when you go to battle with people, you're going to get wounded. I mean, last summer was, it was very sad as I saw a lot of my friends getting hurt at Anheuser-Busch. And, the guys delivering the beer at 6 a.m., the brewers, the people that love that company, the wholesalers across this country. It's just sad. There's just, man, and I'll tell you, there's a couple lessons. And this is the number one thing I took out of that is wherever you find hate, you'll find me on the other side. I don't care what it is. You will find me on the other side of it, regardless of the partnership, regardless of the subject. I will be on the side of forgiveness and love and the stuff that Jesus teaches. I got no tolerance for hate. Because it's like, who among us, judging you will be judged? Who is not fighting the paradox of life, you against you, every day? In between your 6 ears, or 6 inches between your ears. And so as we waited in the summer, the thought I found this as I got over it in the first 2 weeks. The first 2 weeks were a little like, holy smokes, because they went from, Bud Light to Folds of Honor to me. And these crazy people coming out of the woodwork, finding your cell phone, your email, and it's like, well, we've never done that before. And, Folds of Honor, our team on social media, deleting all these horrible, hate-filled, awful words coming from really sad, sick people that can jump from one beer can to like Folds of Honor and then me. But it's like, this is like such a gift in life. I've got a really good ability generally to laugh at myself and don't take yourself so seriously. And we'd sit around on Saturdays and I'd be like, here are the top 10 from the week. And I'd read them to my wife over a Bud Light. And we're like, oh my gosh. And you give these people in their basements a little street cred for the absolute brilliant craziness that they would come up with. But yeah, man, it's like when a friend needs help, you help them. And I'm a fiercely loyal cat. I love people and love the people that come into our church, and we'll stand by them. And it's turned out, beautifully for Folds. I mean, they ratcheted up their donation. They took us to the NFL with Bud Light
Yeah.
as a result of this, and never in my wildest dreams. I mean, NFL is the greatest brand in the world, to hitch your wagon to. And I was last Tuesday, I spoke at the NFL Summit, and front of the Kansas City Chiefs and 27 NFL teams about Week 8, and Folds of Honor will be the all-in for Week 8. Folds of Honor in the NFL around our first responder initiatives, taking care of those families. So, and I'll give you one stat because it's like, why first responders? Every 6 seconds in this country, 911 is dialed, and 240 million times a year. Hundreds killed, thousands critically wounded coming to rescue us. And it is shocking that there's never been a charity to take care of the families' educational dreams. And so getting into that fight to help first responders and having Bud Light and the NFL be founding partners is awesome.
That's going to be cool. Well, I want to ask you some lightning round questions, but just to kind of wrap up the Folds,
Yeah.
like if someone's listening to this, they feel compelled, which they should, it's an incredible charity. Just what would be the easiest way for them to get involved with Folds?
Yeah, just visit our website, Folds of Honor, and there are lots of ways to get involved. Donations. We will, just for scale, we'll send about 11,000 people to school in August. So about 50 million out the door. We have 18,000 qualified applications.
Wow.
So a lot of people we're not going to be able to support. And I would just tell them, if they're listening and would like to make a donation, we will pay it forward to the tune of 91 cents on every dollar donated. We're the top 1% of charities in this country from an efficiency perspective. So we get the dollars out the door. We're like you guys, man. Midwestern values. We're in Owasso. You guys are in Topeka, land of common sense. And a lot of charities, I think, unfortunately, lose their ways. But my promise to anybody that donates is we'll get those dollars to a deserving family, and they need your support as we head into this next school year.
Yeah, it's such a great charity. So I think on 4th of July, awesome one for everyone to, as you listen to this, just go make a donation. We'll make it that easy. So if you listen to this weekend, go make a donation. Okay, I want to ask you these quick lightning round questions. These can be quick, easy answers that we wrap with. So going back to COVID, I say a lot of people, I think, maybe had new thoughts around leadership or learned some lessons through COVID. Is there any one lesson that you took away from that time that you're going to carry forward for the rest of your life?
Like normal life with your family is a blessing.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah. I think that's a big one. I've heard that more than a few times.
Normal is awesome.
Yeah. Okay. Second question. What is the one thing that you feel that you've done that graduated you from being good, I'll say good leader, to a great leader?
Going through a lot of struggle in life, because the thing that prevents you from being a servant leader is your ego. And God had a plan to stomp that out like a campfire in me, and it sucked going through it. But looking back, I am so grateful that, man, that He got rid of my ego, and I understand I got nothing to do with nothing. And to go in and be a servant leader requires you get rid of your ego.
It's good. Okay, third question. Is there something that you're doing this year to drive your own personal growth or challenge yourself that you're excited about?
Yeah, Bible in a year. So this is a horrible confession. I've never read the whole Bible. Never made it through the greatest book ever, man. I try to live it. There's places I love in it.
Yeah.
But I've never done the whole thing, and I'm doing Bible in a year.
I'm going to confess I haven't done it either. So I have a buddy doing it right now too. So, okay.
There's a great app, Hallow, the Hallow app. It's a Catholic based app, Mark Wahlberg and a bunch of guys. But I'm going through, there's a good way to go through the Bible in the year. I don't know. I mean, you can't open it on page one, man. At least not somebody as dumb as me and
Yeah,
get through that. And it bounces from like Old Testament to New Testament. It serves it up in like a way that you can digest it with some explanation. So I highly recommend that.
that's good. Very cool. Okay, fourth question, somewhat related, but what is the book? Can't be your own book, but what is the book you've recommended most to other leaders?
Oh, I don't know if I haven't recommended it necessarily to leaders, but life
Yep.
book is The Alchemist. So you've read The Alchemist by
I
now.
have. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, that's the story of my life, man. I'm selling my sheep all the time. It's like, oh, you've gotten to this place. Like the devil's greatest weapon in your life is complacency. Like successful people, oh, I've gotten it. I'm here. And that's the beauty of that book, The Alchemist, man, is you got to fight every day to be uncomfortable because those are the moments that you build self-belief, self-worth. And I love The Alchemist.
Yep.
I've given it to a lot of people.
It's a great
So
book.
many good books. I'm reading all the time. Great leaders are always learning. My buddy Dave Novak, who's a former CEO of Yum Brands, has an amazing podcast out there. I was like, what's the one thing that ties great leaders together? They're always learning.
Yep. Agreed completely. So,
Dude, like avid learner. It's like I get so jazzed to like, what's next?
okay, final question then. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Oh my gosh. It's it's simple. There are probably longer, better answers, but it's from a buddy of mine. He's actually chairman of the board of Folds of Honor, Mike Arbor. It always works out.
Yep.
It does, man. They're going to be hard times, easy times. I don't label them as good or bad because my hardest times actually have turned out to be my best times.
Yeah.
But man, it always works out.
It's funny. I actually say that around here all the time. People get stressed out. I'm like, hey, when has it not worked out? Right. Ultimately,
Yeah.
we'll figure it out. So that's a
Yeah.
great way to end this. Lieutenant Colonel Rooney, thank you first and foremost for your service. Thank you for all the work with Folds of Honor. Thank you for joining us today on the podcast. So for those who want to follow you maybe personally and then Folds of Honor, just can share the best ways for them to do that.
Yeah, so you can find anything out there on Folds of Honor. I'm at Lieutenant Colonel Dan Rooney. Check that out. But yeah, I'm just closing saying thank you to Advisors Excel for being great partners. Thank you to Gary Woodland for bringing us together. Keep him in your thoughts and prayers as he continues to recover from just crazy surgery and trying to get him back to normal life is well. But just a blessing to share. And my hope and prayer is that the folks that tuned in, man, you took one thing away that sticks with you for a long time and makes a positive impact in your life.
Well, I think more than anything on this weekend, you said it best at the beginning, that celebrate the red, white, and blue, and just put all those differences aside and celebrate the great people who've made this country what it is. You being one of those. So I appreciate you again taking the time.
Cheers. God bless everybody.